Remember, a ventral ramus is the front branch of a spinal nerve. After the spinal nerve exits the vertebra, it splits into a dorsal ramus going to the back muscles and skin, and a ventral ramus going to the front and limbs. Plexuses are made by ventral rami coming together and redistributing fibers. This is how one muscle ends up with nerve fibers from multiple spinal levels. The cervical plexus, C1 through C4, supplies the neck and diaphragm. It helps control big neck movers like trapezius and sternocleidomastoid through the accessory nerve, and it gives rise to the phrenic nerve, the breathing nerve that powers the diaphragm. The roots of the brachial plexus are really ventral rami, not spinal cord roots. These 5 nerves, C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1, are the starting point of the plexus, and every nerve of the upper limb can be traced back to this set. The 5 roots merge into 3 trunks: upper, C5, C6, middle, C7, and lower, C8 through T1. This step condenses the plexus. 5 nerves come together and organize into 3 larger bundles. Each trunk branches into 2 parts: an anterior division heading toward the flexor muscles on the anterior surface of the forearm, and a posterior division heading toward the extensor muscles on the posterior surface of the forearm. These 6 divisions reorganize into the cords around the axillary artery. The divisions regroup into 3 cords: lateral, medial, and posterior. They're named for their position around the axillary artery, which runs right through the middle of this network. The lateral cord splits 2 ways. One branch becomes the musculocutaneous nerve, flexors of the arm, and the other branch helps form the median nerve, shared with the medial cord. The medial cord produces the ulnar nerve, the funny bone nerve for the hand, and also sends fibers to join the lateral cord in forming the median nerve. The posterior cord branches into 2 powerful nerves: the radial nerve, which extends the elbow, wrist, and fingers, and the axillary nerve, which supplies the deltoid and shoulder sensation. The brachial plexus can feel messy, but it's really a stepwise flow. Roots become trunks. Trunks split into divisions. Divisions regroup into cords, and cords branch into the major nerves. Different nerve injuries cause distinct motor deficits. Radial nerve injury produces wrist drop. Ulnar nerve injury causes claw hand, and axillary nerve injury weakens the deltoid and shoulder abduction. Remember, a ventral ramus is the front branch of a spinal nerve. After the spinal nerve exits the vertebra, it splits into a dorsal ramus going to the back muscles and skin, and a ventral ramus going to the front and limbs. Plexuses are made by ventral rami coming together and redistributing fibers. This is how one muscle ends up with nerve fibers from multiple spinal levels. The cervical plexus comes from the ventral rami of C1 through C4. Most of its small branches supply skin and muscles of the neck. Two parts are worth remembering. First, it communicates with the accessory nerve, cranial nerve 11, which helps control your trapezius and sternocleimastoid muscles. Think shoulder shrug and head turn. Second, and most important, the cervical plexus contributes to the phrenic nerve. That nerve runs down to the diaphragm and is absolutely vital for breathing. You'll often hear the phrase C3, C4, C5, keep the diaphragm alive. That's the phrenic nerve's root contribution. When we start the brachial plexus, it all begins with 5 ventral rami, C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. These are called the roots of the plexus. Now, be careful here. When we say roots in this context, we don't mean the dorsal and ventral roots coming off the spinal cord. We mean the ventral rami after they've already joined the spinal nerve. So these are the true starting branches that will build the network. From these 5 rami, C5 through T1, everything else in the plexus is constructed. Every trunk, every cord, every terminal nerve of the arm can be traced right back to these 5. Okay, so now our 3 trunks are going to split again. Each trunk gives off 2 divisions, an anterior division and a posterior division. This is where the plexus starts sending fibers in different directions. In general, the anterior divisions carry fibers towards the front of the limb, which supply flexor muscles. The posterior divisions carry fibers towards the back of the limb, which supply extensor muscles. So from 3 trunks, we now have 6 divisions. Don't worry, these will recombine again into something more organized, the cords. Now, the 6 divisions reorganize themselves into cords. This is where we finally start seeing a neat 3-part structure again, just like the trunks. And the key landmark here is the axillary artery. The artery runs right through the plexus, and the cords are literally named for where they sit around it. The lateral cord comes from the anterior divisions of the upper and middle trunks. The medial cord comes from the anterior division of the lower trunk. The posterior cord comes from all 3 posterior divisions. So, if you remember one thing here, it's this. Cords are named in relation to the axillary artery. Picture that artery in the middle like a hub, and the cords wrapping around it. The lateral cord now divides into 2 important paths. First, it continues straight on as the musculocutaneous nerve. This nerve powers the flexors of the arm, muscles like the biceps brachii and brachialis. So think elbow flexion and forearm supination. Second, part of the lateral cord joins up with a branch from the medial cord to form the median nerve. So the median nerve has a dual origin, part lateral, part medial. This is a good moment to remind you that the plexus isn't just one-to-one connections. Nerves often combine inputs from multiple cords. The medial cord also splits 2 ways. One branch continues as the ulnar nerve. This nerve runs down to the forearm and hand. It's the nerve you hit when you bump your funny bone at the elbow. It controls many of the fine movements in the hand and contributes to grip strength. The other branch combines with the lateral cord to form the median nerve. So remember, the median nerve is a joint project, part lateral, part medial. Ulnar nerve injuries lead to claw hand, while median nerve injuries lead to ape hand, or difficulty with thumb opposition. The posterior cord takes a different route than the lateral or medial cords. It produces two major nerves. The radial nerve, this is the largest branch of the brachial plexus, and it's the big extensor nerve. It powers the triceps at the elbow, as well as the wrist and finger extensors. A classic clinical tie-in or injury to the radial nerve. It causes wrist drop. The axillary nerve, also called the circumflex nerve. This smaller branch innervates the deltoid and teres minor, and it carries sensation from the skin over the shoulder. If the axillary nerve is injured, you lose deltoid function. And suddenly, shoulder abduction is very weak. Now, let's pull the whole plexus together. If you zoom out, it's just a flowchart. Start with the roots, C5 through T1. Roots merge into trunks, upper, middle, lower. Trunks split into divisions, anterior and posterior. Divisions regroup into cords, lateral, medial, posterior, named by the axillary artery. And finally, cords give rise to the branches, the terminal nerves that actually power the upper limb. This is the framework. Once you've got this pathway in your head, adding the muscles and clinical ties is much easier.